She was asleep before the second episode ended. I know the exact moment because she'd been making small commentary on the show, a dry observation every few minutes, the kind she saved for things she was only half watching, and then she went quiet. And then her head shifted from the back of the sofa to my shoulder, and that was that. I stayed very still the way you do when someone falls asleep on you, and you decide not to be the reason they wake up. It was 11:30 on a Friday night. We'd had takeout and a bottle of wine, and she'd been tired since she walked in, the specific tired that doesn't announce itself but lives in the line of someone's shoulders and the slightly slower way they form sentences. I'd noticed and hadn't said so. She'd put her feet up on the coffee table and tucked a cushion under her arm and kept saying she was fine to keep watching, and 20 minutes later here she was. Her phone lit up on the cushion beside her. I didn't mean to see it. The phone was facing up, which wasn't my choice, and the screen stayed lit for long enough that the preview was visible before I could decide not to look. It was a text thread. The most recent message was at the top. Not incoming, outgoing. One she had drafted and never sent. I think I've been in love with you for a long time, and I don't know what to do with that. The screen went dark. The room went back to the sound of the television and her breathing, and the quiet of a Friday night in a flat where two people have been comfortable enough to fall asleep in front of each other for years. My name is Sam Hartley. I'm 33. I teach secondary school history, the kind of teaching that requires you to convince 16-year-olds that events from 400 years ago have anything to do with them. Which is harder than it sounds, but occasionally, when it works, feels like the most important thing you've done all week. I live in a 2-bedroom flat in the east of the city, and I have been, by most reasonable measures, a person with a settled life. Except that I had just read a text that wasn't sent to me. Except that the text was about me. And except that I now had to sit very still, with Rowan's head on my shoulder and her phone face down on the cushion where I'd instinctively placed it, and work out what to do with a sentence I was never supposed to have seen. Rowan Ashby is 32. She works for a small architecture firm, junior partner, which she'd earned in 4 years that would have taken most people 7, not because she was aggressive about it, but because she is constitutionally incapable of doing anything at half measure. She moved to the city 6 years ago, to the same neighborhood I'd been living in for 2 years before that. And we met in the way people meet in cities, when they're both at the same obscure pub quiz that a mutual friend had dragged us to separately. She got the question about the 1953 flooding right when no one else did. I got the music round. We came second, and she said it was because of the music round, and I said it was because of the flooding question, and we'd been arguing about it in the fond, circular way of people who don't actually disagree every time it came up for 6 years. She has a habit of reading 2 books at once, one serious, one not, which she describes as structural balance. She makes tea that is consistently too strong and has never acknowledged any feedback on this. She sends voice notes instead of texts when she's walking somewhere, and then sends a text afterward correcting whatever she said in the voice note. With more precision, she is the person I call when something goes right, and the person I call first when something goes wrong, and she has been both of those things for 6 years with a reliability I had stopped noticing because it had become the weather. The thing that's simply there, that you only notice in the moment it's absent. I had been not thinking about her in a specific way for a long time. I had been doing this carefully, deliberately, with the full knowledge that I was doing it, and I had been reasonably successful. The way I managed this was by keeping things in the category they belonged in. The category was friendship, which is a real and large category that contains a great many things, and I had put everything I noticed about Rowan in there with the diligence of someone who understands the importance of correct filing. The way she remembered small things I mentioned in passing, a book I'd been meaning to read, a calf I'd said sounded good, and quietly acted on them weeks later without announcement. The way she was the only person I knew who asked, "What are you thinking about?" and actually wanted the answer, not the edited version. The way she'd once sat on the floor of my hallway for 40 minutes while I talked through a decision that was, by any external measure, minor, and had not once looked at her phone or made me feel like the problem was too small to deserve the space she was giving it. The way she laughed at her own jokes a half-second before she finished them, which I had always found inexplicably perfect. All of this I had filed under friendship, correctly, because that was what it was, and I had not looked at the filing cabinet at an angle. I was significantly less successful than I had believed. The text was one sentence, 30 words. It had been drafted, opened, written, not sent, on a Friday night when she was sitting on my sofa with wine and takeout and the particular ease of someone who was comfortable enough to fall asleep. She had written it and not sent it, and put her phone down and closed her eyes, and the phone had lit up on its own, on a timer or a notification, and shown me something she had decided the world was not going to see. I sat there for a long time. She slept the way she did most things, without fuss, with complete commitment. Her breathing was even. She'd pulled her feet up at some point and was half curled on the sofa, her head still on my shoulder, one hand loose near the cushion where her phone was face down. Professor Biscuit. This is a different Professor Biscuit, I should clarify. This is the small procedurally named succulent she'd given me as a flat warming gift 3 years ago, that I had, against reasonable expectations, kept alive, sat on the windowsill and observed me with the impartiality of a small green plant that has no stake in human emotional complexity. It did not help. I thought about the 6 years. I thought about the specifics of them. The second year, when her firm had lost a contract she'd spent 4 months working on, and she'd called me at 8 in the evening saying nothing was wrong, and then talked for 2 hours about everything that was wrong. And I'd sat on my kitchen floor and listened, and asked the questions I knew she needed to be asked. And when she finally said, "Okay, I'm actually fine now," I'd said, "I know," and meant it. The way she'd sounded at the end of that call, lighter, the way a room sounds after you've opened a window, had made me feel something I'd filed under friendship. Because that is what it was, and I was not going to make it complicated. The 4th year, when my mother had a health scare that turned out to be nothing, but wasn't nothing for 3 weeks, and Rowan had showed up at my door on a Tuesday night with food, and the second season of a show I'd mentioned once in passing 6 months before, that she had somehow retained and tracked down, and she sat with me on the sofa, and didn't make it heavy, just present, until the weight of it was something I could carry, rather than something carrying me. I had thought, that night, that I was very lucky in the specific way of a person who doesn't fully understand what they have until they're holding it. The 5th year, at a work thing she'd come to as my +1, when a colleague had said your girlfriend seems lovely, and Rowan had not corrected him, and I had not corrected him, and we had both, for approximately 45 minutes, not corrected him. Until Rowan had said in the car home, "You should probably have corrected Marcus," and I'd said you also had the option of correcting Marcus, and we'd sat with that for a moment, and then she'd changed the subject in the decisive way she had, and I'd let her. I had not looked directly at that evening for a year. I had kept it at an angle, the way you keep things that are too bright to examine straight on. There was also a night, 2 months before the sofa, when we'd been at a friend's engagement party, and someone, a well-meaning stranger with wine and sociability, had asked us how long we'd been together. Rowan had laughed and said we're not, and the stranger had looked between us and said, "Oh," in a tone that clearly meant, "Well, you should be," and then drifted away. We had stood next to each other in the aftermath of that "oh" for approximately 4 seconds of charged silence. And then Rowan had handed me a canap and said, "These have truffle in them, which you either love or it's ruined." And I had eaten the canap and said nothing about the 4 seconds. And she had also said nothing about the 4 seconds. And we had been, between us, very practiced at saying nothing about the 4 seconds ever since. I was thinking about the 4 seconds. I was thinking about all of it, sitting on the sofa in the dark with her breathing even on my shoulder, and her phone face down on the cushion, and 30 words I had not meant to read, rearranging everything I thought I understood about my own filing system. The phone, on the cushion, the draft text. 30 words that had been sitting in her phone in that state, written and withheld, for some unknown amount of time. Days, weeks, the whole Friday, possibly, while she'd sent voice notes and corrections and come over with takeout and said she was fine to keep watching and fallen asleep with her head on my shoulder. I am not a person who handles certain kinds of information quickly. I am a history teacher. I know that the significance of a moment is rarely visible from inside it. I sat on the sofa, and I was, for once, completely inside the moment, and could feel every edge of it. When she woke up, she did it in the gradual, unbothered way she had. A slow return, rather than a startle. The way people sleep who have made their peace with waking. She lifted her head from my shoulder and blinked at the television, which had moved on to something neither of us had chosen. "Sorry," she said, in the hoarse and unguarded voice of someone still arriving. "Don't be," I said. She sat up and reached for her phone with the automatic reflex of someone checking in with the world after a gap, and she looked at the screen, and something in her expression changed. Very small, very fast. A fraction of a second where something moved through her face that she then put away with the efficiency of someone who had been putting this particular thing away for a while. She set the phone down, face down, and reached for her wine. "How long was I out?" she said. "About an hour," I said. "I told you I was fine to keep watching." "You did." She looked at the television. She took a sip of wine. She was doing the thing she did when she was recalibrating, not visibly, just internally, a small adjusting of whatever she'd walked in carrying. I said, "Rowan." Your phone lit up." She went still. Not dramatically, the kind of still that is a form of listening. I didn't try to read it. The screen was facing up, and it was lit before I could. I saw the preview. "I'm sorry. I should tell you that I saw it." She didn't move. She was looking at the television, or at the space where the television was. Her hand was around the wine glass, and her fingers had tightened once. "Okay," she said. Carefully, the single syllable of someone buying a moment. "You don't have to say anything about it," I said. "I wanted you to know that I saw it. You can tell me it's old, or it was a mistake, or it was meant for someone else, and I'll take any of those." But I didn't want to. I stopped. I looked at the side of her face, the careful profile of someone holding something in place by will. I didn't want to sit here knowing something you don't know I know. That felt like a different kind of wrong. The television murmured. Outside, the city was doing its Friday night things. Inside, the flat was very quiet in the way that flats are when something is being decided. She set the wine glass down with the precision of someone making sure their hands have something to do. "How much did you see?" she said. "All of it," I said. It was one sentence. She pressed her lips together once. She looked at the coffee table. She looked at nothing. Then she said, very quietly, to the middle distance, "I've written that text approximately 11 times in the last 4 months. I don't know why I keep writing it. I've never sent it to anyone. I don't know who I'm even writing it to." I said, "I think you know who you're writing it to." She didn't answer. "Rowan," I turned toward her. "Look at me." She turned, and her face had the expression I had seen exactly once before, on the night of the lost contract, at the end of 2 hours on the phone, when she'd finally stopped managing the distance between what she felt and what she was saying. The unguarded version. The one she kept for the moments when she was too tired to maintain the other one. "I'm not asking you to say something you're not ready to say," I said. "You can take the exit. We can put the TV back on and you can sleep the rest of the wine off on my sofa, and tomorrow we get breakfast and argue about the flooding question, and nothing has to be different." I held her eyes. "But if that text is about what I think it's about, I want you to know that I have been not thinking about you in a specific way for longer than 4 months, and I have been significantly less successful at it than I believed." She looked at me for a long moment. Her fingers had released the wine glass. She was very still in the way she got when she'd landed somewhere and was deciding whether to stay. "The flooding question," she said. Quiet, the voice note register, the one she used when she was saying the true version of something before she sent the correction. "Yeah," I said. "I got that question right," she said. "I've always gotten that question right. I let you have the music round because you needed it. I have been letting you have that argument for 6 years because you like it. That landed somewhere I didn't have a word for yet. That's," I said, "a very Rowan thing to have done for 6 years." "I know," she said. And then, with the smallest voice, the one underneath the dry and the precise and the carefully managed, "I didn't know what to do with it, Sam. I didn't know what to do with any of it. You're my person. I couldn't work out how to want more than that without risking what that already was." "I know," I said. "I've had the same problem." She looked at me. Something moved across her face, not relief exactly, more the specific expression of someone who has been holding something in both hands for a long time and has just been offered somewhere to put it down. I reached across and took her hand. Just that. She looked down at it, and then she turned her hand over, and she held on with the particular grip of someone who has been waiting to hold on for longer than they've admitted. We didn't say anything for a moment. We didn't need to. The television was still on. The city was still outside. The small procedurally named succulent on the windowsill continued to have no stake in any of this. "The flooding question," she said eventually into the quiet. "You can have it," I said. "I've always had it. I know that now." She laughed, the surprised kind, the one that arrived before she'd approved it, and leaned her head back against my shoulder, and I thought, 6 years. 6 years of voice notes and corrections, and 2 strong tea, and the flooding question, and 1 sentence written 11 times and never sent. 6 years of the thing being exactly what it was, right there in plain sight, waiting for a phone to light up at the wrong moment and make it finally impossible to file away. She fell asleep again around 1 in the morning, which I took as a sign of either deep comfort or the wine, and probably both. I didn't move. I sat in the quiet of the flat with her head on my shoulder and thought about the specific weight of something that has been there for 6 years and has simply, finally, been named. In the morning we had breakfast. She made the tea, too strong, no acknowledgement of any prior feedback, and we sat across the kitchen table and she told me about a building her firm was working on, a conversion project that had a structural problem she found technically interesting, and I told her about a lesson that had gone right that week in a way I hadn't expected, and it was the same as it had always been, and also nothing like it. She sent me a voice note from the walk home. In it, she said, "I've been thinking about what you said last night and I want to clarify one thing, which is that the music round thing wasn't pity, it was strategic, because you become completely insufferable when you lose and I've always found it more efficient to just..." And then the voice note ended. 2 minutes later, she texted, "I mean, I also like you." Obviously, that's the clarification. I kept that text. I keep all of them now. I don't file them anywhere useful. They are simply there, the way she is simply there, in the permanent and unambiguous category of things I am not trying to look away from anymore. 2 years later, when people asked how we got there, how two people who had been best friends for 6 years had finally stopped pretending the friendship was the whole of it. Rowan said a phone notification deserved significant credit, and she found that extremely embarrassing. I said I'd been writing a version of that text in my head for longer than 4 months and had never had the nerve to do anything with it. And in a flat on a Friday night, a phone, on a cushion, face up, lit for long enough, had done what 6 years of careful management had not, made it impossible to look away from the right thing at exactly the right moment. Nothing had come from nowhere. The text had always been true. It had simply, finally, been seen. What would you have done if you'd accidentally seen something on someone's phone that changed everything you thought you understood about them? And have you ever been writing a version of something in your head for years, sure you'd never say it, until the moment made it impossible to stay quiet? Tell me your story in the comments. If you liked this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.